Environmental issues have several dimensions.
The important thing is that the industry wants skills and the competencies.
That is, how can we build ethical, moral citizens?
Multidisciplinary knowledge required in solving complex problems.
Hi, I'm Rishikesh. Welcome to another round of the NEP dialogue. Today we're going to talk about service learning, and I have a special guest with me, Dr. Rohit. Hello, Dr. Rohit.
Hi Rishi, thanks for having me here.
My pleasure, and it is lovely to have you speak about this topic which we call as service learning. But there are a lot of us who do not understand what service learning is all about, particularly when we are talking about education.
Sure, service learning, just by its definition, it's known as a credit-bearing experience where students are part of an organized service activity to meet some unmet needs in the community, and students also get a chance to reflect on the service activity, which should lead to a better understanding of their course content, a deeper understanding of their discipline, and also development of civic responsibility. Service learning essentially has 4 components. The first one being service in itself, where you're actually providing service to a community partner who the institution is trying to collaborate with. Second aspect is academic connection. This is where service learning differentiates itself from just volunteering, where it's not about just providing service, but there has to be an academic connection to the problem that they're trying to solve, so that students use the knowledge that they gain in the classroom to be able to solve this problem in the community. The third aspect is reciprocal partnerships, that the partnership have to be a two-way partnership where the institution is benefiting from it because students are getting to learn by applying knowledge from their classrooms to a real-time problem, and also the community is benefiting from it by receiving the solution that the institution or the faculty and students are providing them. The last aspect, very essential, is reflection, that students have to be able to given guided opportunities to reflect on whatever they've done and what does that mean to them, and how has that impacted the way they view the world and just their profession. I strongly believe that service learning has a great connection and alignment with NEP, because the National Education Policy talks about pedagogy to become more holistic, more learner-centered, more experiential, more discovery-oriented, and also more inquiry-driven. And all of these things get checked by service learning. And National Education Policy also envisions education to be a way for us to develop good citizens of this country, good human beings who are capable of rational thought, who are compassionate, who are empathetic, and who also become ethical and moral citizens of this country. And for us to be able to achieve all this, service learning is a great pedagogy that can help students achieve these outcomes.
Well, thanks. That's a lovely introduction. I think we got a very good overview. Just to get back on to the National Education Policy 2020 and how it brings service learning into, let's say, the core of pedagogic activities. And if you can give with an example as to what NEP is trying to get all stakeholders involved or engaged in service learning, and how you have been able to try it out, experiment with it, and let's say also have best practice in place. Is there anything that you could share with us?
Definitely. I think the various stakeholders that get involved in service learning are essentially the community and the institution. The community members' involvement is very critical, and from the institution standpoint, the faculty and students, so the various stakeholders who are involved in the process. But with respect to existing models, it's very context dependent. Even in terms of our higher education system, there are so many different institutions, affiliated, autonomous, private universities, public universities. So the context where you're implementing and the community context is very important in terms of what model works for you. So there's no one fit for all solution, but a few examples that I can give is service learning can be integrated into an existing course where you're teaching students something, and then you have a small service activity where they're implementing whatever they're learning through that activity and also benefiting the community in the process. Or it can be an entirely new course in itself where students are going to the community, identifying specific needs, and in that process coming up with some solutions that can benefit the community. But this is through an entirely new course. There are also ways where service learning can become its entire program. It's particularly quite dominant in the Western countries, particularly in the United States, where I've done my PhD from. The university I'm at, Purdue University, there's a very well-known model called Engineering Projects for Community Service. It's an entire program in its own, where it's offered as an open elective, where any student can just come in and take that course for a semester. There are also universities like Colorado School of Mines, where they're offering an entire program called Humanitarian Engineering, where the program is driven essentially by a lot of service learning aspects throughout this. There are again affiliated colleges where you don't have all this flexibility. That's when you can also offer service learning as a co-curricular activity. In fact, my institution, KGD College of Engineering in Hyderabad, we recently became an autonomous institution, but the last 2 years we've been implementing service learning through the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan program, which is offered as a co-curricular program for students. So the various models, I think it really depends on what fits best for your context, and also what fits best in terms of the community partner that you have.
Right. But I think what NEP is trying to do is to not just keep it at the co-curricular level. In fact, NEP tries to say that everything that happens within the learning environment has to be curricular. And so do you see that there is space or should things have to be still done to ensure that something like service learning becomes part of the curricular activity within a learning environment?
Definitely, I am a strong promoter of service learning, and which is why I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share more about it. I strongly feel that there are various aspects of our curriculum where it can be integrated into the existing curriculum. For example, my institution, we've redefined our vision statement, where one important aspect of it is to contribute to the socio-economic development of the nearby communities. So we have integrated courses into our autonomous structure, where students are taking up courses right from the first year. We teach them design thinking. We have a course called Innovation for Rural Development, where students spend at least 8 weeks in the community to identify problems based on what they share after spending such a long time. And the second year, we go about taking those problems and spending a whole year to be able to solve them through the human-centered design approach. Following the entire process, starting from empathizing to testing the product or the solution that you built, and also deploy it in the community. So the various aspects of it, and I definitely see there's a huge scope for it. It requires intention from the institution standpoint to be able to want to provide service to the communities nearby.
Right. This is wonderful, because I think NEP's intention is that, and when it talks about autonomy to higher education institutions, it is looking at institutions taking up these efforts to go towards finally ensuring that whatever happens in the space of education is beneficial to the community. And what I did find very interesting in what you said is, in spite of yours being a technical institution, you primarily offer at this point of time engineering, and you are able to integrate service learning. And so service learning is not again something that only social science departments do, but then any institution, be it any program, you can integrate it if you really have the intention.
Yes, definitely, right, because service learning, the aspect, the whole part is you're providing service to a community, and in that process you're identifying complex problems in those communities. As I think we all know, all of these problems, either in the world in general or in the industry, they're all multidisciplinary in nature. So even my students struggle right now, because we would love to have some social science students also collaborate with us to really able to scope these problems, because we don't come with that understanding. We would like some people from education come in. So I feel the problems in real time are all multidisciplinary in nature, which is why service learning as a pedagogy is a great tool to introduce multidisciplinary nature of education in institutions. Most institutions right now are monodisciplinary nature, and the NEP talks about that in the next few years institutions should be around at least 3,000 student intake and have different fields or different disciplines where students have access to courses from different schools. And how do you bring in all of these fragmented things together? I think service learning is a great tool as a pedagogy, because it provides you to work on these complex problems which are all multidisciplinary in nature, and the more multidisciplinary they are, the better, because once students graduate and go work in the industry or any development sector, work in an NGO, all those problems are multidisciplinary. It's important for you to be able to negotiate between different disciplines on what each of us play in the larger piece of the puzzle, and it's more a systems approach where each of us work on subsystems, but also we learn to respect each other and know how all of us contribute equally to kind of working on this problem.
How do you distinguish between, let's say, a service learning pedagogy versus a project based learning, problem based learning? What kind of a connection do they have, and where is the distinction?
I think they have a lot of connections because problem-based learning, you are solving a problem. The center of the pedagogy is the problem. And even in service learning, we are working on a problem, but that problem is, we're trying to solve a problem with the community. So the community aspect comes in here. With respect to problem-based learning, the problem can be potentially from industry or it could be from anywhere. But here the problem is from the community and we're trying to solve that problem as a way to provide service to the community. A lot of service learning programs have projects involved. Some of them might not have projects. Again, it's very dependent on the context. If it's an existing course you're integrating service learning in, then I don't think maybe the aspect of project might not be really there because of the logistical concerns of a course. But if you have a own service learning course on its own, then it definitely will have a project. So I think really it depends, but there are a lot of connections between PBL and service learning. Few differences, but a whole lot of similarities.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that PBL is the larger umbrella under which service learning is an important approach, or you wouldn't want to put service learning under PBL but rather say that it has its own
I would
stand?
place it as a separate pedagogy of its own because there are similarities and also differences. So if it's under PBL, then I think there's some aspects of it, for example, reflection like I spoke about. It's a very essential component of service learning because when I said students are able to build civic responsibility to service learning, that happens because they reflect on their service activity, what they did do, how did they do that, why did they do that way, and what does that providing a service to a community means to them, and how does that impact their profession when they look at it in future. Now reflection is a very essential aspect of service learning but might not necessarily be an essential component of PBL. So which is where I feel there are similarities. So I would place it as a separate pedagogy but definitely very close to each other, and I think the entire umbrella is learner-centric pedagogies because they're all learner-centric, and I think that is the big umbrella that it comes in.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So Dr. Rohit, NEP talks about critical thinking, problem solving, lifelong skills, all these as those very important skill sets that need to be developed in students, not just in school education but also even if it is developed in school education, further enhanced in the higher education space. How do you see something like service learning enabling these aspects?
I think there's a direct correlation, Rishi. First, I really promote and admire the National Education Policy for promoting these skills, which I consider as deeper learning skills, because knowledge is technology is changing very quickly, everything around is changing quickly, but these are the skills that students can always keep in with themselves going forward. If you just look into how the entire process of service learning, the first aspect is identifying a community partner, spending some time with them to be able to critically identify what are the problems in their community, and also critically identify which are the most pressing problems, because there's so many problems to solve. Which ones do you actually solve? And once you identify, critically think and identify these problems, the next step for anyone is about problem solving, irrespective of which context or which discipline, or maybe multiple disciplines coming in together. They all engage in problem solving, the human-centered design approach to ideate, come up with multiple solutions and validating them with the community, and really making sure we build something for them that is very much in line with the needs of the community. Then there's also aspect of lifelong learning. Reflection, like I spoke about, is an essential component of service learning. When you reflect, particularly for lifelong learners, they should not be able to just know about what they're learning, but they also need to know how they learn. Each of us are different in terms of our learning styles, and we need to be able to reflect and think about, okay, what is the best way do I learn, and how do I learn, and what all do I have to learn? I think education cannot stop after college. Once you graduate, there are there's much more learning that has to happen outside the college. So the ability to have lifelong learning, the students should be able to think about, okay, what are the tasks at hand? What is that I know? What is that I don't know? Where can I seek this additional information, and how do I learn the quickest? So what kind of tools can I use to learn? All of these are some things students have to learn by themselves, and that happens internally in your mind, and that happens through reflection. So constantly reflecting through the service learning activities, students are better able to understand about their own learning process, and that significantly impacts their intellectual development. And once they get out of college, they're able to, the skills stay with them lifelong, and they're able to constantly be excited about learning, know where they can find this information and how should we go about it. So I feel all of these aspects, lifelong learning, critical thinking, problem solving, multidisciplinary learning, they're all essential components of NEP, and are all that something could be contributed through service learning when used as a pedagogy.
Wonderful. In fact, that's a very strong case that you're making to make service learning as part of the core curriculum or core pedagogic approach in any higher education institution.
Not only higher education, I think it should also be part of K-12, because these aspects of critical thinking, problem solving, you don't have to wait to go to higher education to learn these skills. When you teach them very early on for kids, their identity starts building accordingly, and they become a lot more matured, they become moral citizens, ethical people, and I feel they're much better prepared even before they come into higher education. So there's still less case studies on maybe how service learning can be integrated into K-12 space, but I think that's definitely something for us to explore, do research, come up with publications for the larger community to implement.
Absolutely. And I think the curriculum that even currently exists, and definitely in the national curricular framework that is evolving, it is going to come in as a very important component for the school education space. And as you rightly said, I think once children imbibe these aspects, and when they come on to higher education, there is already an intrinsic motivation to get into it.
True.
And once the higher education space provides for it, I think there is this then beautiful relationship and kind of a symphony that would be at play, right?
Definitely, and if you even think about it, our gross enrollment ratio in higher education is still very low. It's still hardly 35, less than 40%. So students from K-12 being able to decide that no, I need higher education, they can think critically, think for themselves, think about lifelong learning before they come to higher education. A lot more people will be motivated to get into higher education, pursue it and complete it, irrespective of their external factors that can not support that. There should be more resources, more scholarships, more incentives for students to be able to do that. But I feel more and more students will take responsibility of their own learning before higher education, and that will significantly help them not only go to higher education, but also which courses do I pick,
Absolutely.
which ones mean the most to me,
Absolutely.
which we talk about multidisciplinarity in K-12 in the high school from 9 to 12 right now, where NEP recommends it to be a semester-based system with having different courses. As of now, by 10th standard, we ask students to pick, do you want maths, science, commerce? How do someone pick by 10th on what they should do in future? But I feel by building these skills like critical thinking, problem solving, lifelong early on, they will be able to make much more mature and right choices and meaningful choices that will help them find careers that they love to work.
Wonderful. You are in fact making your case stronger and stronger. So you're also saying that service learning could help in pushing our gross enrollment ratio to the target that NEP puts forth at 50%. Currently, different states have different GERs. Overall, in fact, our national average is much lower than even 35. We are just about 27%. So that's wonderful. There's this other aspect which comes in immediately when one talks about service itself, which is about empathy, developing empathy. And NEP is again from a policy point of view very concerned on ensuring that there is an empathic citizen coming out of our education system. How do you see the connect, and what you have done at your own institution using service learning? Have you seen this in your students, or is it too short a time for you to just see it?
No, I've definitely seen it, because empathy is something that doesn't take for a long time to someone to feel. I might be biased about service learning, definitely.
No, but as humans, we are naturally empathic is where you're starting from.
I feel there's no better tool, according to whatever my understanding is, to make students feel empathy through their college. When you are organizing a service activity for students where they're going to a community and trying to understand what their problems are, it requires you to take some time to spend some time with them and really feel their pain. Empathy is something that can be felt, you can't teach, and that's something very personal to everyone. Only when you feel the pain of others, only when you have the opportunities to feel the pain of others, will you be able to start becoming more empathetic individuals. And empathy, when taught to students very early, even in the K-12 or higher education, it really, and when they reflect upon it, it really impacts their identity, their personality, and their overall development. They start becoming more compassionate, more caring, and they want to do more, not for just themselves or their family, but also for others. And this is what NEP really, the core of NEP is how can we build ethical, moral citizens who are all working towards, in line with whatever is written in our constitution, for a better country, a more inclusive, equitable society. And how do you do that is only by experiencing empathy. And it's something we talk about as a general term, but then not everyone experiences empathy. I'm a lot more service oriented, because while I was growing up, my dad was very involved in Lions Club. So it's not service learning itself, but it's volunteering. And I was able to go there, be part of it, be able to experience the pain of other people, especially from disadvantaged communities or marginalized communities. And that significantly impacted how I felt about giving back. And a lot of what I do, I try and make sure, which is now I'm promoting service learning, is because I feel when you learn to give back, there's a pleasure that you get out of serving someone. And when that happens very early on, it becomes a part of your personality. And then after you graduate, no matter what you do, either in development sector or you work for the industry, you will constantly, I believe, think about how can I do more for my country, more for others in the country. And we as a society have to go in that direction. And more importantly, the climate change, we all are talking about it. We're going to be having huge climate disasters in future. So whatever we're doing, it's not only about for ourselves, but how are our actions impacting the society, the climate, how is it impacting sustainability? These are all conversations that you will start thinking by yourself if you learn how to empathize with others and reflect upon it, on what does that mean to you. So I really believe empathy is a great tool for all of us to have. And if the millions of students that we have, if they become empathetic individuals, I'm going to be very happy for the future of our country.
One question that comes from a pragmatic point of view is that most students, when they come in for an undergraduate course, even if you're going to go into a 4-year undergraduate program, or students who come in only for the masters, who would finish their masters in just 2 years, the time is really short for one to see the kind of change one would wish to when you're looking at a problem at a community level, at a society level. What is a pragmatic way to go about it? So for instance, anyone looking at bringing in service learning into their higher education space, are there some tips, are there certain guidelines that you think can be shared?
Sure. I think before I go to the guidelines, I already mentioned that reciprocal partnerships is a very essential element of service learning. And I want to re-emphasize on that, because a lot of times, you rightly said, students come in to college for a short duration, and there are more extra credits, and after they finish the course, they might want to go to some other course and then soon graduate. And once they graduate, everyone's priorities change. Now, this is where service learning makes this distinction from something like PBL is, you're not solving a random problem, you're solving a problem in a community. So there's a commitment that you've given to them that yes, we will work with you in a reciprocal partnership to be able to solve this problem. Change takes time. Sometimes it's small, it's quick, sometimes it's not quick. But if you want to truly see impact, which is why it's service learning, you need to be able to remember that the impact that you create is of utmost importance. So sometimes it's not that from a logistic concern we have a course for 5 months, but it's not that okay, a service learning project has to be fit into 5 months. It might not be possible, because that entire project might take a year and a half or 2 years also. So it's the onus, I think, comes on the institution. I think the responsibility of wanting to impact change in the community. So you need to make sure as a faculty that the opportunities you're providing to students of service learning in your curriculum, either through existing course or a new course or a program, is structured not just for your academic purposes, but also it's structured in a way that it impacts the community. So for example, I really like the EPICS model, which is followed at Purdue University, more specifically because students don't work on a complete project in one semester. The projects are there. the faculty structures that projects into semesters depending on how long they are. So if I'm a student coming in and taking epics as a course, I might not be able to complete the entire project, but I'll work on some part of it, and then I get done with it. I learn something in the process, and also the service activity involved, but the change has not happened yet. The next semester, maybe some of the members continue to stay, but new members can come in and continue going on. So it cannot be very academic driven, because then your partnership is a one-sided partnership. Most of the communities that we work with, at least in my institution, we're working with a few villages as part of the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan program. So when we go to these villages, we expect them to talk to us about their problems immediately, and just we'll go there and just say, hey, tell me about your problem. No one is going to tell. Problems are something very deep, personal to you, and you need to build some kind of trust, respect, and then they start opening up. So we spend a lot of time with them to be able to only scope the problems which are very important to solve. And now some of these projects could be potentially for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. So it's important logistically that the logistics of our course don't drive the logistic of the project, because they're very, very different things. So which is why service learning is not easy. It needs thoughtful consideration. It needs compassion to that community that you're working with, and remembering that if there's no service happening, then there's no service learning. And a lot of times engineers, because I come from that background, we get excited about solutions. We'll build something that might not be very useful, and we'll deploy it in the community. But if they don't make use of it after that, then it's just some other major project that you're doing, which could either lie in your college, but it's lying in the community. So I think these are very important issues to consider and think about, and careful consideration of these should go into the design of your programs in whatever aspect you do. One-sided partnerships can be very threatening to an institute and community partnership. It's an institute and community coming together, and if you want to see sustainable change, it might happen 4 to 5 years. The institution is not going anywhere. The students can come and go, maybe the faculty, but the institution and the community are staying. So the commitment has to stay from both the stakeholders, and the various players in this can figure out ways where there is sustainable partnerships that exist.
Dr. Rohit, you spoke about the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan and how you were able to utilize this program from the ministry. Could you share a few more details about it?
Definitely. The Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, it's been I think 7 years since it's been launched. It's launched by the Minister of Education and spearheaded by IT Delhi right now. The program mandates every higher education institution, or if not mandate, encourages everyone to partner with 5 villages nearby their institution. They ask students to go about collecting some data to understand the most pressing problems in these villages, and see how the institution can work with these 5 villages in a long-term basis to provide sustainable solutions that can impact the socio-economic development. I'm a big promoter of the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan program, because I believe, like Mahatma Gandhi said, India has to grow through its villages. We're going to be celebrating 75 years of independence soon, and I still don't think there's been huge development happening towards villages. But I feel institutions and students particularly, we have such a large population of students, all of them smart minds. I think their valuable time during college can be spent on working towards rural development. I don't think one student can do it, but collectively institutions spearheading this partnership with villages can really work towards working towards their socio-economic development in future. Right. We have so many institutions around the country, and there's so many villages around the country. So I feel this is a very reciprocal win-win situation for the students, right, and also the village population in the country to be able to co-work with each other. Another aspect of this program which I really admire, and I've seen this through anecdotal evidence with my students, is once students go to these villages, we have a misconception that they're unhappy, they're poor, and they're living a very sad life. At least a lot of my students had this. But once you go there, you really understand that they live a very sustainable life. They're very happy where they are, and they're a community which is a very community-centric. They believe in values. They believe in welcoming these students, telling them about their village, their history. And these villages have been existing since so many centuries. So there's a lot of history out there. So it also builds in a good relationship between the urban students and the people in rural India, because there's a reciprocal respect and a partnership that is built. You look at them not only in terms of from a marginalized standpoint, but you look at them with respect. You appreciate some aspects which they have, which urban folks don't have. And the program is continuing, and I would really love for more and more institutions to take up this program and support our larger mandate to contribute to the development of India through its villages.
Okay, that's wonderful, Dr. Rohit. So not just an ambassador of service learning, but also ambassador of this particular program, which you seem to have really utilized. And I'm sure higher education institutions across the country would do so after watching you on this episode. Dr. Rohit, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It was very insightful. I've also learned quite a bit, and I'm sure all those who watch us would have a lot of takeaway from this.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share about service learning and just promote more about national education policy, and I hope to be part of further conversations around this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, we come to an end of this episode. We look forward to having you again in the rest of the series on NEP Dialogues. Thank you so much.